and welcome to the Occult Rejects.
Wow, I love it.
No, sorry, Nick. I had to do it one time.
That's all right. It's great.
So
I'll let you do intros if you ever want to do intros on the Occult Rejects. I try to get Headless to do it because I don't even like doing it. And then the great thing is I'll start the show up and he forgot that I already asked him to do the intro and he's just sitting there. I'm like, fuck, I guess I'll do it anyway.
Well, what I like about you is that you kind of like have your structure that we all kind of follow, right? That's kind of how the show works. Is we know like how the flow is going to be, and we all kind of like wait our turn and do our thing. But so I guess I will do a mini intro for my show. So I'm Jin the Ninja, Threshold Saints, but it's really Nick's hosting it on a live stream. So Nick's in dialogue with me. We're going to talk about magical experiences, and Nick's going to tell his story, which he has been a madman, sort of getting out into the world and podcasting with many other people. And so I knew when Nick and I were speaking that I knew I had to do it. Like I had to have a conversation with Nick myself, because I really, Nick's like kind of my hero in podcasting. Not my hero, but like like someone I look up to, and I think everybody knows that. So because I always say that.
Listen, man, there's a whole lot of stuff I don't know that you do. So I mean, it goes both ways, dude. That's why I just really rejects, because you fill in areas I can't fill. You know what I'm saying? You cover areas I can't talk about. So you're just as important.
Well, I appreciate that. But I also think that the way we speak to each other, not just off recording, but just like when we pregame or do the shows a little after, like speak to guests a little after, I find our conversations very edifying, but also like quite deep. And I think that to do it publicly, in the sense that we will just speak normally, but then other people get to hear like more of the inward way that we speak, is actually interesting. There's something magically interesting about that.
No, for sure. I do. Like there's really only specific people I can really see. Like, well, not so much like favoriting anybody, but like like you and Headless. When I go to, depending on what topics we're talking about, I do feel like, I guess since I would consider us both occultists or magicians, maybe even just backgrounds, it's different than like talking to somebody who might be having you on the show that doesn't have any experience with that stuff, but is interested in you telling them about it and their listeners. Like there's only certain people that I could even have conversations with, like for real. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to podcasting or even in real life. So I even feel like it's just like a totally different, I don't know how to explain it, but like, yeah, it's a refreshing conversations with you guys.
What I always liked about
somebody who gets what I'm saying to an extent,
No, 100%. I think what is interesting about Occult Rejects, and I'm going to have you I want you to give a little history, like when this goes on my stream. Obviously, I want people to hear like your story of podcasting, because I've said on my show, like podcasting is sort of a surgical practice for me in some ways. Not it's not like my only thing, but I think I treat it like that. I think I treat it like a great work or a magical operation, at least a magical operation. Maybe not a great work, but maybe building towards that. But I think that to hear your history of it and how you started, because for a lot of people, for a lot of occultists, I think your show was an OG show, and I think your narrative and perspective has changed a lot in the last few years, and I think it's actually been really good. I think like I always liked the show, but I think that now what you're talking about, and you're kind of meshing reality, like these. Well, you do a lot more true crime without me, but when you have more occult topics, you bring me on, right? Sure. And so I think what you're doing now is you're blending, like looking at reality through occultism, but you're not saying, oh, it's evil. You're just saying, no, this is what, there's a secret meaning. There's an inner layer behind what is going on, what you're being told. And I think everybody needs to, I think people need to hear that more than ever now.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. I mean, even when it comes to, the Cult Rejects, it's a little bit more, I guess, has a little bit more tentacles out there, or hooks, than I originally did. Originally it was very much, and this was something that It was always, not always, but I'd say a few months into it was something that I guess irked me. But again, the Occult Rejects when it first started was me and Lux. It was a two-person show, and I was totally understanding that we both have to have a give and take, and what he likes to cover may not always be what I want, but it might be a good topic, so why not do it anyway? It was very much like something that I've tried to change, and may even be something you've noticed. It was a lot of like kind of pointing the finger at, blaming. Like I all right, I thought it was good, like the way we covered the Shriners and the Jesters. But I still feel like there was a way of like kind of pointing at and blaming them for certain things that was just like a hot topic to either point at. You know, it's like kind of like giving people a bad guy to focus on. You know what I'm saying? But I still thought it was a good series. Lux was very much into like again, you know, shit happening to kids. I thought that at some point was a little too much, but whatever. It was a thing that he liked to cover a lot. So like a lot of it always, I just felt like was always geared towards like something horrific, or like some like bad guy, or like something fear based to try to get like hits off of exposing. And I've said this about even prior to why I even got involved in magic, is because a lot of the occult stuff that I was interested in prior to joining the OTO was very much kind of like that same basis, as where I was being shown what orders exist, supposedly what horrific things they do, and who can I blame and hate for controlling the world. But I literally don't know anything about magic or the occult still. So that's why I ended up getting into something so I could learn. I still felt like the show wasn't really like touching on all that as much, but it is what it is. That's how the show kind of started off, where we had topics and we covered different orders. Random Nordica, we were always like, looking for something to say, oh my God, they're occultists and they're trying to manipulate you and they're fucking with kids. I kind of wanted to start actually stepping away from that and actually getting into like trying to show people like what the occult is, like from a non-biased way, and just like kind of like basics of just understanding. And that, we eventually started to get into, because I started to try to push those topics more. We covered the Kabbalah, covered the Scarlet Horse series. That was a very magical time of my life, because I was even fucking with magic for that series. I'll totally admit it. If people wanted to go back far enough and listen to that series, I mean, it's probably like 2 or 3 years old at this point. But like every episode has like kind of a drawn out intro, which is deeply occulted stuff. Actually, it's all like kind of like me mixing archetypes and ideas of the occult, and even some of the video work. I was, I was fucking with magic, and it definitely shows in that series, I think, too, because I was even using magic in the sense to even help make that series better. And I'll totally own up to that. I have no problem admitting it. And then, people might understand as we get into this show later on, the benefits of magic in my case. So we started pushing more on those type of like topics, and things ended up happening with me and him, and we split up. And like at that point, I was just kind of like, shit, I don't even know what I'm gonna do. To be totally honest with you, I just was like, I had my show, the NY Patriot show, and I had the Occult Rejects, and I basically had the NY Patriot show just as like for me to have guests on, for me to like learn shit, or just really even part of it. To be totally honest with you, which is something why I stopped doing the NY Patriot show, was really, and this is a real sad fucking reality of podcasting. I'm just gonna throw it out there. People will just have people on just so you can fucking just switch people's names around and just get heard and seen. And it's like, it was so fucking fake. I mean, just be totally honest with you, it's fucking fake. It's just, whatever. And I had that for that reason, and I let that go. I said, fuck that. I just got to focus on topics. I got to focus on the occult. And I started to try to find guests that I thought could help keep me going in between trying to figure out topics I could cover with somebody. Because like that is a passion of mine, and why I wanted the Occult Rejects is because besides like me talking to other people, I actually want to cover and create my own stuff. That's why sometimes like I'll even with the intros, there's just a way of me adding art to my art. or to throw occult secrets in there as symbolism. And eventually I came across people like, Headless, you. I mean, I already had Teresa was already feeding the occult rejects topics. I mean, shout out to her. We had used her for like 2 or 3 shows prior, and she started coming on the NY Patriots show. So, I said, well, why not? She's an occult reject now. TJ, Lisa, Robbie Marks, and I started realizing I was like, I actually have like a handful of like people that are really good at researching or really good at what they do. And a lot of them they all have like their own work. Like at one point when I was kind of lost, and this is going to sound cheesy, I was watching like a Wu-Tang. RZA kind of actually put out like his own like short series about Wu-Tang. It's really not too truthful or on point, but it's interesting enough. That's just my opinion. But I was kind of looking at it. I was watching that, and I had the idea of like I kind of have a handful of people on the reverse aspect. Like they all have their own shit now, but I could bring them all together and actually use them like in one group to get all their different aspects. And like I already know that they're good because they already have their own outlets and they already have people listening to them. So like I just found that I was in the position to like at one point I was like, holy shit. Like I don't know if there's a gift from God or what, but I actually just one day realized I have all these people I could just bring together now. That like I actually trust them. I'm friends with them to an extent. And like even the differences that we have, it hasn't changed our friendship. So I was like, this is like fucking rare, honestly, in the podcasting community. It's fucking a gem. So like that's kind of like how I ended up like kind of bringing the occult rejects into what I think it's been for like the last year and a half now. And I think it's just getting going, in my opinion. There's a lot more stuff that I think will pump out that will be impressive. I think it'd be very different than other people's opinions, and not saying that theirs is wrong, but I just think it will go a little bit deeper and actually cover some of these secrets in the occult and not the same fairy tales they want everybody to keep regurgitating.
I mean, I completely agree with you, Nick. I think that that is the challenge, is that, but I also will give credit to your show originally, because I think you did several incredible series that I encourage everyone to go listen to. I know that you personally don't think that they are perfect. However, we just have to let the work is what it is, and then we can, if you want to go back and do it now, you can. But the Scarlet Horse series, I think, is like a seminal occult podcast series. I know a lot of serious occultists have listened to that series and said how well done it was. So that one, your Kabbalah series, your series with Mario on chakras, and you've had so many. And I did like that Shriner series too, and I actually thought it was really interesting. I learned a lot on the Order of Quetzalcoatl and all that. Like I had
that was
no
good.
idea.
Yeah.
And then you did an episode with Thrash on the Navajo, like the jesters, and that was really great too. So I think that you've had a lot of classic podcast series that you've done, like long form series, and I think that that's what's interesting about your show is you never shied away from having guests do repeat, like continuations of their same topic, which is more rare, actually, I think, for podcasts, because podcasts really want the newest thing, the freshest thing. They want this guest who's like getting the numbers, like, and I get it. Like I'm not saying that is bad. I'm just, there is something to be said about long form series, and then you let me come on and do a long form series, which I obviously still like a lot. So.
Yeah.
And I want to shout out Teresa as well, because she has been a guest on my show, episode 12. I think I called it Magnificat and et Magisterium. I can't even speak, much less Latin today. But so yeah, it was. We did on a little bit of the history of like Canadian Marian devotion, and it's actually a really interesting episode. And we brought up a lot of like indigenous kind of metaphysical stuff. So I think it was really, I really appreciated it, because I had just started my show, so she didn't really know probably what she was going to get. But I was really inspired by the series that you had been doing with her on the Marian Mysteries.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I want to do something like that, but a little like an offshoot.
I mean, that is I'll just be totally honest with you. I mean, that even honestly shows for me the diversity of of the show is that like you'll have Teresa who's like a Catholic. I mean, I tell her to her face she's more of a Gnostic. I don't know how she likes that, but you know, but like she questions things, you know, and then like I have you on there and you're totally different style, headless, totally different stuff. You know, it's just and somehow we all end up getting along and kind of almost seeing the same thing when we're covering a topic. And I think that says something right there.
There absolutely does. There absolutely does. Is that there? This is what I always say, Nick, and I never say it on your when I'm on your show as like part of the circle, I guess we'll say. But I really think that like there more people know about the occult than not, maybe, but I think the perceptions and like the layers of what people understand and how they are understanding them and how they are perceiving them, I think that is largely wrong. And that's not to say like I'm some great, perceiver of the universe or whatever. I'm not. But I think I have a certain degree of understanding. And I think for me, I try and take the when I'm on your show, I try and take the lead that like or not the lead. I let you take the lead, but I acknowledge that we are doing something interesting and sort of breaking. I often call it breaking klipas on my show. Like I just go very Kabbalah. I don't. I don't. I
And yeah,
don't
turn into
withhold
the
it.
Kabbalah. It's so rare to find other people into the Kabbalah the same way I am.
Well, I told you this on my Tantra series that your Kabbalah series really helped me kind of be like, this is actually okay to talk about. This is not something that I have to read and hide and pretend like I don't think is really metaphysically profound and interesting. I think that that's what I always liked about you, particularly, is that you were like, let's talk about it. Let's go through the colors. And I could hear you. Like I could hear you when you would talk about it, and it would be so profound for me because I would be like, I understand what he's saying. Like I can see the color that he's talking about. I know sometimes you read from the Dion Fortune book, which I also use
Yeah.
sometimes, but when you would talk about it and you would talk about it like I mean, I'm not a David Lynch guy, but I know you love Twin Peaks. Okay. But when you would talk about it and you'd be like, okay, the colors of this, like I've never seen a full episode of that series in my life. But when you would talk about it, I could understand a degree of what you were saying because I could understand the Kabbalah of the colors and the Sephirah that you were talking about.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's like a magical language that it kind of transcends like your point of view almost, and it kind of it's like almost like Esperanto. It's like a universal it's like a universal tongue. We all know what each other are kind of talking about actually.
Yeah. No, and that's the funny thing is that actually kind of almost like even goes with like what I was saying before. And like, besides the Wu Tang idea, at one point I was just like, well, like kind of like what I was really thinking in another sense of the way I was putting the show together. And like, again, like, I do think the guy was an occult genius, but I do also think he was a degenerate and he probably let his demons take over before he died. But not to like promote Crowley, but I was like, in some way, I almost want to put like an audio version of 777 when I cover topics. Like in 777, his book, it's basically an associations book.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at like each thing and then like go down the line and see like, well, in Greek pantheon, it could be this, and that it could be that, and that it could be that. These are the crystals that go with that. These are the herbs that go with that. These are the drugs that go with that. These are the things that go with that. And I was like, if I have all these different people that are into those different types of styles, it's like we're approaching a topic in the way 777 would be kind of done. And that sounds probably out there and cheesy, but I did kind of like make that connection. I was like, oh, it's kind of badass in a way. Instead of a book, I'm just doing it audibly, with audio and video.
There is something that is interesting about this particular medium, I think, from a magical, like as technology is like a spiritual technology or a magical technology, our phones are clearly a magical technology. And electricity and the bandwidth. You were talking about this like years ago, so I'm not trying to, take your bit, Nick. I get it. Like you've been saying this for years. So, but yeah, that's true. So, but then there's also something that's interesting about like the internet, and like we're moving into the future in this kind of like, the internet is sort of a parallel universe in many ways, I think. And so like
think the
what
medium that we use just to try to do well is, let's say, I think honestly what sucks is that we've got to fuck with black magic just to even try to help people.
yeah, yeah, that see
This
that's
is
the
such a
thing.
fucking mind fuck.
Well, no, I'm so glad you said that, because it is true. Like like for people who don't want to admit it, like you can't really be trad you can't really be like a trad Christian, like like I'm not talking about Christian, I'm talking about like those people who LARP as trad Christians
Lord.
online, and then they're like, yeah, magic's bad, or this is, it's all Satan's work, and like, okay, that might be true, like say it is true, but then you're using it too. Like you're engaging with the tools that you're saying are like bad. You're actually using magic right now. Like what we're doing is magic right now.
Totally believe that. The way that equipment works and the way the internet works, you can't. There's no way you can tell me that ain't fucking magic. In this reality,
It's absolutely magic. It's absolutely magic. I
it's,
mean, our
it's
phones are crystals, precious metals. It's so obvious to me. They're black mirrors, but it's more than that. It's more. I don't even like when some other podcasters won't say who, but they'll talk about like the black mirror. But you know what? It's true. But then there's also like, what do you want to do with it? Like, what is your will?
none of this would work if there was no such thing as a magnet. Isn't that fucking something? Think about that. You need a magnet for any of this shit to even work because it's sucking light. It's fucking weird, man. Think
Yeah,
about
it
it.
is. It's really cool in some
Literally,
ways.
it's like almost. It's almost like you need the monolith for any of this to exist.
Okay, so that's another interesting thing for the title of this episode, is this idea of Saturn and Binah and what that is, and like everybody's like, oh, it's the black cube, and it's like this, but like you need to come into formation. It's like a
I,
metaphysical. It's a law. Like it doesn't work.
I do think, looking at Saturn more now, maybe with certain experiences that I've had and like way of looking at it differently. Sometimes I do just think it's almost as a magnet, but you can get it to switch polarity, or it will switch polarity. It's in a weird sense. Like I think your pupil and your eyeball, you can do that too. It'll project or suck in. I think Saturn is kind of more like that.
Well,
That's why there's a life and a death. I know this is getting deep and out there and like probably topic really, but I mean it almost makes sense if I was to go into my visualizations and my experiences, people would be like, "Oh, okay, now I see where he's getting with the whole polarity change." But I do think that might be something behind Saturn, or at least the cube, or something like that, or magnetism. I don't know why. I
well,
just feel like magnetism is associated with Saturn in a sense. Just that's how I see it in my experiences, I guess.
no, but like, I mean, you're totally right, Nick. Like, this is not out there for my show at all. This is like very much on, on brand for whatever that is. But no, I agree with you that there's. I mean, I think in even Liber 777 that hematite is one of the stones of Saturn. I believe so. It's been a while,
Yeah.
but I think that is a Saturnian stone, and it does make sense.
Well,
And when you do,
I've heard that regardless 777. So I mean that idea is widely accepted anyway. So you're good on that.
okay, good.
Yeah, I've heard that
But,
before. I've bought hematite because of that reason. So I know you're correct.
so that makes even sense to the Cabalistic colors. There's there's that flashing metallic color. It's not black, it's not blue, it's kind of somewhere in between black and blue. Anyone who's heard me with Robbie knows that I talk a lot about this Sanskrit idea of the connection between black and blue. How sometimes there's an idea like Kali is very black and blue, but it's both. It's not really one or the other. You're supposed to really understand it in this non-conceptual way. But I think it's interesting to tie in your I series, which is another seminal occult rejects series, like really seminal, really important. I'm not saying you were like the first one to cover it, but I think that the first person in podcasting to really explore this idea in depth, because you had Lisa on and you were able to really expand the ways of like understanding and thinking about it by pulling medieval and then contemporary, more telemite or OTO material, but also like the medieval stuff, which I know you were really getting into. So that's really interesting. Why don't you talk about some of your eye stuff? I know that you think your audience has heard it, but it's really quite groundbreaking. I think you don't give yourself enough credit for that, Nick, but I
Okay.
think you should.
Yeah, that is actually something. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but end up redoing parts of it maybe, or maybe focusing back on the Zaniel's Zen and the optic nerve. I would love to do at some point, but yeah, that series. And the reason why I say I'd like to redo it, well, even in the beginning, this is just the truth and how it works. Even from part one, after seeing other stuff and being able to see other, like, match it in other art or how it relates to me in experiences, I even started to like change what I thought I was seeing in episode one than I was in the third, and it made much more sense. So I mean, I even corrected how I thought I might have been wrong in the symbology that I was looking at. But in my opinion, I do think it's actually a very solid, how would I word this, thesis or a defense, like, of saying that there is occult symbology, I think, in occult ideas, um, religious ideas, uh, that can be found in the eyeball. My opinion, I think, when it comes to religion, I don't know if maybe because I was pre-exposed to it, but I think you will see a hell of a lot of Catholicism in the eyeball if you were to, take the time to look at specific parts and from different angles. I think you'll see a lot of occult symbolism when you start looking at how the eyeball lens moves, uh, how the light will change and the way the angles will change. You might even see sigils in there or logos, in my opinion, if you start looking at it correctly. Um, this is a bold claim, and I think maybe, and I'll say it because I think Jin might understand where I'm going with this. But like, I even think to the extent the lens in the Zanyals of Zin. Now the lens reflects; it can go up and it can go out your eye. And the Zanyals of Zin hold your lens, and it's kind of like the machine in your eye that actually will move, and that changes everything. They'll bend your hyaloid canal. They'll change your pupil. That whole thing moving and being able to move is what kind of is the machine of all the magic that's going to start going on, I think, inside your eye. That's the Zanyals of Zin, and that's connected again to the lens. I actually think, this is just my opinion, I think that's what Yesod is, in that deep understanding in the physiology, when it comes to the body, because it's even considered the machinery. It's supposed to be like the moon because it's reflecting light. I actually believe that that's the machinery, and that's I think there's deep Cabalistic stuff inside the eyeball as well. I guess what I'm getting at. So it's definitely worth, in my opinion, to look into. I think, and I stress it a lot. I stress it a lot, and I've been stressing it with this topic that we're going to talk about it, or whatever that I've been talking about on other people's shows recently. Is that if it's not even my show, go look at my boy London McLovin, KJV. He's on here now. Go check out his shows. Doesn't have to be out of my mouth, even though you'll see me on some of his shows anyway, because he thought it was good work. He replayed my stuff on his channel, which, much love, man. I appreciate that. There's other channels out there too. A few of them, and I don't think they went really, except for London. I mean, I think us two have actually gone pretty deep with the occult aspect. Not too many other channels I thought have, but I mean, there's other people out there where they are pointing to, like, at least even flat Earth. People even starting to say they think flat Earth is coming from inside people's eyeballs. That's like a whole, whatever. There's something in there. If you start looking inside the eyeball, I promise you'll start seeing weird shit. Some of the deeply occulted secrets, I do believe, is inside the eyeball, and the experience that you will have crossing the abyss. And in my opinion, in order to cross the abyss to an extent, there will be death. Something like an NDE, or maybe actually death. So like, I guess what I'm getting at is that, besides the eyeball, the visual and physical feelings behind the experience of death is actually some of the most deeply occulted secrets out there. That's in art and in logos, and it's in a lot of our faces. That is exactly why I had Mario make the logo that I have now for that eclipse, and I've been tossing in that and tons of other stuff that I've made or other people have made, is because that is an image that I see every single time I have a magical experience. And I know other people do too. And nobody seems to be talking about it. So now I'm going to be completely fucking blatant about it. And I will put it out there constantly. I will explain it if people ask me. And I will go on and talk about my experience constantly if people keep asking me, because nobody else wants to talk about it. And I don't understand why, because there's definitely magicians out there that have had the same experience. When they put the microphone on, all of a sudden they turn retarded, I guess.
Well, this is something interesting, Nick, is because I have a question, and I think that when I've had Zach Schumar on, shout out to Zach, who's been like my homie, my kind of like a reject, I guess, for my show, or my threshold saint, I guess. But um, it's this question of are the magicians in the world Manichaean? Like, are they just so black and white? Like, everything has to be like it's either or, it's never neither nor, which is a neither nor is a very Buddhist kind of way of thinking. I think that's why I'm flexible with my ideas. And so I can say, like, when you're talking about the eye, I can see it. Like, I can see Brahmaloka. There's like a half egg. It's contained in there. It's like a sphere. It's like a dome, you could say, over the thing. And then there's like this lotus, which are the zonules of Sin, but it's also like it can also be like, yeah,
Actually.
exactly.
But you
So,
know what? That's like even something I want to add. Like, and again, like this is I don't know how to even. I'm trying to say this like the most nicest way. Unfortunately, within the conspiracy community, and I will even say with the occult community, not so bad with the occult community because they will actually pick up books a lot faster than the conspiracy theorists will. Um, there was not a lot actually of read or even understood or even like practice probably hardly at all. Well, the people who practice have the huge fucking shows. The people down below haven't practiced or done anything or really read anything, but yet preach that they understand this stuff. So I mean, that's like a problem in itself. Is that like what I'm getting at is that like I on our show has easily pointed out that there's books from anywhere from the 1200s to the 1600s that are like basically the 1600 ones, without a doubt, you can't even argue that one, are pointing literally at the fucking eyeball and the brain. And their stuff is more descriptive in the eyeball, honestly, in their drawings and some of the stuff that you could even find online that's being done with, a microscope. And it's like, how is that going on back then? Occultists are into the fucking eyeball. There is something up with that. We want people running around worrying about UFOs or their bullshit fucking version of adrenochrome.
but isn't that's the greatest lie? It's to say that the kingdom or the palace or the mind palace or whatever the fuck you want to call it, whatever like stupidity is outside of you. But the really interesting thing about magic is that it really teaches it's inside of you. That's like real magic. That's like real shit magic. I think Nick knows this too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the real magic, is that it's inside it's like a place you go in your mind or in your eye, but it can be both. That's what's really crazy about it.
I love it, McLean. I love it. But
Usually I don't talk like this with you,
yeah,
but on my show this is more normal.
yeah. But no, like they're really, again, stressing, please, people look into the eyeball, and look into people having NDEs, and you'll start to actually probably start to know more about the hidden occult secrets than 90% of the people behind the microphone in the conspiracy community do. I'm not even trying to be a dick. I'm just being real talk.
Well, isn't it interesting that there's only some parts of the conspiracy community that will accept occultism, and like those people
Oh,
are like
It's all Satan.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If they accept it, then there's another faction that is like, oh no, none of it's real. Like it's not occult. That's like make believe. That's just like they just think they're doing occult stuff. But like those are both wrong. It's both wrong. It's both bullshit. It's like the reality is it's like these are all magicians, but they're not like magicians like how I think people conceive of in their minds. They're like not sitting in like a basement, with candles and like that kind of shit. It's like much different than that. It's like very it's really of your consciousness. I think that's my opinion.
All right, even put it this way too, and I'm not like trying to pat myself on the back, or maybe it just goes along again where it's just beneficial. But I don't think it's completely like where it's beneficial. I think these people actually like me, but like if you look at like where I started and how the show was geared at to where I've changed it to where it's much more actually educational, informational, and much more occult, because I'm really not, again, chasing orders around that's not really fucking teaching anybody anything. But I'm going to show you who the Illuminati is. But okay, well, you still don't understand how you're being mind. It's like, come on. It's like we just keep giving people fairy tales to fucking ponder on instead of actually covering what the fuck is magic and the occult. I don't see anybody talking about really that. But yet they want to go on thinking they know so much. Start talking about magic and the occult instead of pointing fingers at orders and selling art. I don't know. But it's just fucking just makes no sense. Oh, fuck, where was I going with that again? Fuck, before I went on my rant.
No, that's okay, Nick. I think it's really interesting, but I think we should talk about your Black Sun, like how you've been doing this Black Sun kind of like I would call it a para series because
no, so yes, we'll get to that for sure. Okay. What I was going to get at, from where I've been, the way the show started to where it is now, it is completely like a 180-degree turn. The amount of artwork that I've been pumping out and just even using on my thumbnails and posting everywhere, it's blatantly fucking deeply occult. I mean, it's like I've done like, it's obviously I have zero fucks. That's who I am. I'm a magician. I put out occult artwork. I'm hoping people see shit. Nobody asks me anything, but I guess hopefully they're getting something out of it. I'm trying to convey messages with some of that shit. Especially the logo that I had, Mario make. And there's people that you would probably look at that I work with and be like, how the fuck does that even happen now? It's because they know that I'm not actually a piece of shit and they're a biased person. And that not all occultists are actually fucked up. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I will call myself an occultist because of that negative connotation that goes with it, hoping that if the person actually gets to know me, they'll be like, wait, this is fucking weird. This guy's probably like, I don't know, completely different than they probably would have thought I was by calling myself that. So it's just like I think what you were talking about before, how it's not so black and white. It's just like, even look at the way I portray myself now compared to how I used to. And I'm still working with some of the same people that I've worked with back then that are very quick to point fingers, but still work with me and have respect for me. That's has to say something too. Obviously not all occultists are horrible. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
I think there's too many.
So white.
Yeah, no, it's not. And there's too many occultists in the world for people to make that broad assumption because, I'll just speak plainly because this is kind of, at least 50% of this is my feed, but no, it's you're the boss, Nick. But this is the thing, Nick, is that I think that there's so many religions that are teaching a hermeneutic, like obviously Catholicism you mentioned. Teresa and I spoke a lot about this. I think Greek Orthodoxy, like so Cabalistic, their cross is just the tree. And they understand too, like I can tell. I'm just going to be honest. Like you can tell that I won't say who it is, but there's, certain Greek Orthodox podcasters and people in the content creation world, and it's not bad. It's just that they're using colors, they're using logos in a specific way. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that there is, because I do it too. And like, I even think about it for my episode names, numbers, and artwork. Like, how can I link this to greater metaphysical ideas? But like you, Nick, I don't hide it. Like
No,
it's
any
who I am.
piece of art that comes out on anything of mine, if it's a thumbnail, well, if it's an episode on like YouTube or it's a specific thumbnail, probably not. But like anything on my podcasts, or if you see like just the regular Occult Rejects, or whatever plain logo, especially the one I have now, everything that I ever put out is art. If it's a post or whatever, there is something deeply occulted with that. I'm not putting anything out that isn't.
Yeah, 100%. I'm exactly the same.
That's
So
the only reason why I put it out is because I want
I
people to see it and be like, "What is that and why?"
and so I think like what I think the thing is that it's everywhere and it's meant for people to reach a kind of understanding, whether that's deep or superficial. But people who are interested will, like you're saying, inquire further. They will make that like, what is that meaning of that? And not just like the outer, very perception layer, like the very like, what is that? I don't know. It's I don't know, so it must be negative. But beyond that, what is beyond that is something that's more deeper, more profound, more like magically significant. And it's not just the layers of correspondence, although that is obviously important, but there is something visual as well. Like you can see it, but do you really know what you're seeing? I think that's really what occultism for me has become, like what I understand it to be. It's not that people are trying to hide it, because it doesn't feel very hidden. It feels very in the world and of the world, but then it's like these ideas that people don't understand. So they put all these sort of klipas or skandhas or aggregations of words, especially words, because words are very magical as they are from Mercury, right? So there's something extremely, Hode is like is a sphere of the quicksilver lightning. That's even what they call it. So, electric blue dragon. There was a Chinese text that I was reading, and a Taoist text, and I think Ethan and I discussed this on an episode on Occult Rejects, is that it's the lightning blue dragon. So words have this innate magical potential. And so when people like say, oh, this is evil, this is bad, this is, dark, you're not really looking at, you're really talking about the things you actually also believe. Like if you're like a big Catholic and you're saying, oh, these things are evil, well, they're also in Catholicism. They're also in Greek Orthodoxy. They're also in this. Like they're meant for people to walk through the hermeneutic. Now, is it difficult? Yeah, it's a lot harder, I think. I think institutional Christianity has made it deliberately, it's very Saturnian, and I'm not using that in a negative way, but it can be dense. It can be very dense. It can be very slow to move. Maybe your understanding doesn't increase very quickly. Maybe you can't even do it. Maybe the layers are just too dense for people to sort of intellectually at least penetrate the mystical meaning. But I think it's possible. I think
Yeah,
it's possible. So I don't know. I think we're moving into like a new narrative phase where people. I've heard of so many podcasters, Nick, saying this thing about like, yeah, like maybe magic's not so bad, and it's like, yeah, people have been talking about this for like 5 years now. People have been talking about this since all the shit happened, like all the stuff that we've collectively been through. Like maybe we need to not worry so much about the occult nature of reality and start looking more at the real meanings behind the things, because maybe that's what this has all been for. I don't know. That's just my
yeah.
idea.
No, I like that thought. There was something I was gonna say and then forgot. I don't know. I guess since we're already like 43 minutes in or 44 minutes in now. Do you want me to go into the experience? There was something else I was going to add, but then I forgot. I'm probably better off. So let me get.
Well, if you remember, just throw it in. But we're just going with it. But yeah, to definitely talk about your Black Sun experiences. I know you've often called it riding the lightning. You have other names for it, seeing the eclipse. And everybody who listens to my show knows I'm a big Rahu. Rahu's the dragon of the eclipse. So I always talk about Rahu because I think he's really interesting in relation to what the story that you're going to tell, but I'll let you tell it.
Yeah. Oh, what I was going to say before. Yeah. We're talking about like symbolism and the art. And then we kind of we went on somewhere else. But I was going to say, I was just going to throw this out there for people that are like listening. I guess once this gets dropped on audio, people can probably go back and check. But like, I've like made artwork with spiders in it, or I've even made phrases of like, riding a golden tarantula. I even have it on here, rider of the white gold tarantula. Like, even just to give like some background on like why I chose that and I've made that. I'm just telling on myself so people understand, like, wow, I would never maybe think that that's what's in someone's mind when they make this stuff. Which is why maybe sometimes, like, I think people need to realize that when you look at occult art, it may not always just be this one meaning that's supposed to be accepted. It could be a lot deeper than that. But like the spider, for me, one at a certain point in your optic nerve almost kind of looks like a spider, like with the way that it goes. So that's one symbolism behind it. And we have on around our brain like an arachnoid layer that looks like a spider web. So again, now I have two things that are actually pointing back to the inside of your body. It has nothing to do with Satan. No. And the checkered floor is the cones, the black and white cones in the back of your eye. Like, it actually is all eyeball and brain symbolism. And basically in those things. The scorpion, the symbol of death with the eclipse. And when I get into the polarity, this is why sometimes I use snake symbolism and scorpion symbolism for me, is because of the way that retracts. To me, it's very much reminding me of like how it pulled back. I was pushing on the pineal gland, and then how it ends up coming back and striking me. It was very much, I just felt like the striking of a scorpion or a snake. So sometimes I'll use them for even symbolizing that experience I had crossing the abyss. So like now that I'm using symbolism for an experience that nobody would understand unless if they had it. So like only people who've had that experience would understand why that's a. So anything else that anybody else thought, you're wrong. Unless I'm just being serious. And it's, it can be a symbol of death, which I claim death is part of crossing the abyss. So there you go. And again, the checkered floor for the back of the eyeball. Electricity might be in there, or lightning is in there. Just because, I do think, again, showing the optic nerve taking sunlight and converting into electricity. Stuff like that. It's mostly all going back to the actual body. But now to get into the experience. Again, I want to preface this, and I say this on everybody's show. There was no drugs involved. I do not promote drug use with magic. I do not think you need to eat shrooms or you need to eat DMT to have a magical experience. In my opinion, if you take that stuff and your eyes are open, you're actually more stuck in probably Lucifer's world than actually having a magical experience. Living this world with our eyes open, lusting for this experience, basically, which is just reality for us. In my opinion, we're actually kind of stuck in Lucifer's world anyway. But my experiences have no drugs use. Again, the ones that I'll be talking about today, because these experiences were always repeating a visual and a feeling. These ones always had the same experience before I blasted off, at least put it that way. There was no rituals done. So I'm not promoting actually doing ritual work. And I'm not promoting drug use. It was all done in meditation. And that's it. Meditation and some chakra work and some visualizations. Just, I think, to mind fuck the body and whatever, to actually start to like click and start, moving energy around. Basically, that's it. I will close my eyes and I'll go into a meditation. And sometimes I'll like pretend that light is coming in from the top of my head and going down my body, or vice versa, coming up from the floor and going out. But there's this constant stream of like flow of energy, and I'll eventually like kind of like focus it on my body and just actually like feel it in a sense. I'll feel it go up and down. Once I get that going, and this could be a while in, it could take me like 15, 20 minutes to get to that, maybe even longer. Or if I have a good day, 5 minutes. You never know. One thing I will say is that if I go to sit down and I lust to try to make that happen, it'll be a lot harder to make it. Sometimes you have to kind of just sit down and be like, let's see what happens. And me and Genevieve even talked about that. Even with magic, if I try to like really lust a magical experience, it's not going to happen. Because then it's almost like, what's my intentions if I'm like fucking lusting it now? Um, I will then move on to chakra work, and I'll basically just go down my chakras and kind of just focus on them and try to feel them. I guess for people, I don't know, for you, Jim, maybe if you've ever experienced it, to me, it actually, as crazy as it sounds, it feels like a spinning orb or something. Definitely something's going on there. And I would started to focus on my pineal gland more. And this is after, going up and down for a minute, just messing around. I would focus on my pineal gland more. And my eyes, if I kind of almost went cross-eyed and looked up, like kind of towards, I guess, if, where my third eye chakra would be, to focus on it. At this point, normally when I'm meditating for a while, you might get a jinn, or other people who meditate might understand this. It's if I close my eyes, it's going to be, for me, it's going to be a lot darker 30 minutes in than it was for the first 5. I don't know why. Maybe like I'm just not focused on the world around me more, so I'm not paying attention to as much light around me. But whatever, it just seems darker at that point. So it seems like I'm in like a pretty dark space and just like maybe focusing on like 1 or 2 things instead of 1,000. And because even for me, when I say meditate, I'm not saying I'm not thinking about anything. That for me, I've never gotten to that point really. I may be blasting off. Maybe I'm not thinking about anything. I'm kind of just like letting it happen. But prior to that, I mean, I can't say that like I've gone blank. For me, meditation is like kind of like focusing on just like one idea and kind of deeply thinking about it. So like I'm holding my third eye and I'm pressing on it, and it's dark, and like I'm pushing on it really hard, and then it would all of a sudden look like if I was looking down at a black table and I thought it was really dark and black, and I happened to like gently blow on it, and let's say there was like dust on it actually, but I didn't notice, and it blew away and it got really dark underneath, and you're like, oh fuck, that's actually like a really dark table. Something like that. Or if like oil was coming up and it was darker than everything else around it, and it just got like really dark, and right around like the ring of it spreading out would start to look like almost very like bright burning fine lines that of like, just like if you saw an oil slick out in the street, like in water, and you saw like that rainbow stuff, it would be like that around the black, but like burning. It's like, this is another thing too, going forward, for people who haven't heard this for the 10th time, which I'm sure there will be a lot actually on your show. It's just right now in my chat, I'm sure these people have heard this already, but there's a lot of things that I will say I can't explain in the language that I speak, that I will have to try to use like metaphors or things just to try to give an explanation. And I think that's kind of like part of the experience too, and why there's art and why the occult is so deep, is because you actually just have to use a ton of things to try to even explain something that's inexplainable. So like that starts to happen, and like it's bright, like fluorescent lights, like these fine lines kind of like around the black, and then it just like covers my whole vision. And then there is times, not all the time, but like I'd say at least half the time, if not a little bit more, it will start to look like black, like waves or ocean. Almost like I've had, some people have said when they've heard me mention it, it made them think of the black goo. I never even thought of that, but I've also thought the black goo might be like deeply occulted. So maybe that is it. But like I used to almost think of like there was things that I've seen in, oh fuck, what was it? Stranger Things, that they've done with the floor, that I was like, oh my god, that almost looks exactly like what the fuck I've seen. Where it's almost like a black floor and there's like water there. But like I've even questioned this, how fucking crazy I get. And I wasn't even stoned for this like thought. But like I was like, if there's something going on inside my head or something going on inside my vision, like how do I know that that's not like light reflecting on something and giving the visualization that it's a wave, and it's really not moving at all? I know that sounds wild and deep, but you could actually pull that off. with the control of light onto something black, you could probably make it look like it's moving. So like, but like, because then like after a while, it'll look like a wave and just go totally flat and still. That's why I'm like, yo, is there just changes going on with maybe light or something that's making the drastic move? Because it looks like almost like a black silk or black water, and then just like, and then it's like I almost start to like kind of like, believe it or not, go deaf. Like almost like if I had music in my head while I was meditating, that shit's done and gone. I don't even hear that anymore. It's not existent. Like it's like you practically go deaf, or just your senses are knocked off. So I'll just have visuals, and when that happens, all of a sudden there's like a real bright, bright pin dot, like almost like a star. Which I hate to promote the guy, but I've questioned if he says every man and woman is a star. I hate to say it, my experience with fucking with magic does tend to look like it's starting out with a star in the sky. It looks like you see like it's very much like a Viewmaster. Those old things that used to be able to like click and look at as a kid, and it would spin, and it was like these multiple cells that made like a 3D look. It almost looks like that if you were to draw clouds on a piece of paper and you just took like whatever you drew with a pen or a pencil, you just took that outline and like threw it into the darkness and layered it a few times, but then put color behind it, it would give like the shape of like something there, whatever you drew, that outline. It sounds crazy, but that's the only way I can explain it. It seems like you just have like the outlines of like a drawing of something, but it looks very cloud-like or circular around this like burning dot that looks like a star. And the crazy thing is, like, even there's other people on the show that I know has had this experience. I don't know about you, Jim, but like, even, I'm not going to mention the other dude's name, but like, they've seen this before. And this is the crazy thing too, is that it actually feels like I can visually see like a depth between where I'm viewing it from and where it is. And like, that is even wild. Like, you're in your head and it's like, that's fucking far out. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but it almost seems like that is actually like in reality, like that's real, like that distance of the viewing in a sense. It's hard to explain. And I've had other people that was on the show that has explained that to me, and like just in someone saying that, I understood that they saw the same shit. Because again, you're trying to explain something I can't even explain, and you just did it for me. Because I never knew how to explain that, but it does look like it's there, and it does feel like there is a distance between. It's a weird feeling, and or like a heaviness or something, and it starts to get closer. And as it gets closer, you'll start, like for me, it'll start to look like kind of like a black swirling and almost like a dust kind of going around in the middle, and it'll get like a black sphere covering that white dot, and it starts to like grow and get bigger, and it starts to look like an eclipse, and it gets it gets a little bit bigger, and it kind of just stays there. And at that point, again, I still has all those weird cutouts, or those weird, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like engravings or something, or outlines. Just I'll start to see colors popping behind it. So now with all that stuff, it's just almost kind of look like explosions going around the eclipse a little bit. And sometimes it kind of will look like orange or yellow, like very flame like. Again, like I'm saying, explosions. But then at some point, just like the logo that I have with the eclipse and the roses around it, at some point, to me, I remember visually, it will get to just red. And because of the drawings or the outline that's around this vision, it almost looks like roses bursting and blooming around an eclipse, which is why I have the roses around the eclipse, because it's part of the visual that I've seen. It's a way I've tried to symbolize my experience. People would probably have no idea what that logo means, but going by this experience, I can tell people that's what it is. It's a visual that I've seen before I crossed the abyss, and that will stop, kind of, and then like colors will start coming out of it, and it will start spinning circular. It's like spinning, and it will almost start coming out like covering my whole site, like it's reverberating, and it's these fine burning lines again. Like I was saying, like whenever I see colors, it's almost like burning bright neon laser, like it's like piercing the black. It's so bright, and it's normally like a red, green, blue, and purple. And like there's been times where I've even said it starts to look like, at times it can almost start to look like the swastika, you know, which I have wondered again, is that even, again, if I do think that this might be associated with death, could that be a reason why they may have used that symbol when they were associated with death in some sense? So like I'll start seeing that it'll be spinning. Some people I know that have had this experience. A boy called the Crusher, he calls it the Rainbow Bridge, and I've heard other people explain that too, because you
It
kind of
looks
walk
like a
this
flag.
rainbow. And for me, then after that, I start getting like these, it's almost like sacred geometry shapes spinning and blasting at me in flashes. That starts to come. And then this is my favorite part. This is where I had Mario from Symbolic Studies work on it. Again, amazing piece that he was able to captivate like a snapshot and a magical experience for me. Have that the eclipse, and like you kind of have like the swirl in the back, and like all of a sudden it starts to look like, again, I've used movie cells. I gotta take a drink of water in my throat. Sorry about that. I've used different examples like movie cells or subway cars or train cars, and obviously I went with the movie cells because I think it looks a lot cooler. It looks like movie cells coming down out of the eclipse, both coming down the left and right side, going really slow, and they have like different scenes, or like it still looks like different time and places. It doesn't really isn't congruent that much. I mean, there has been things that I've seen where it looks like maybe could be the same stuff, but it's just very much random, and they look like these long windows that always have like a sepia, and like to me it reminds me as if I was like looking through a cellophane window. And I think I've even said to Jin and a few other people, I've even thought that about Lana Del Rey and John Lennon. Not that to fucking say I understand completely what they're saying, but I've wondered when they say that cellophane skies, if they're talking about like the same image, maybe, because to me it's like these cellophane windows of sepia that are showing me like just all these different visions. And one time out of all the times that I've ever fucked with magic, and there's times where like nowadays I haven't gone all the way, but I'll bring myself to this point and know like, all right, like I gotta cut it off now. And I'll think of like, real easy, just think of self and it's over with. But like I think honestly, just being coherent of knowing that you gotta stop, like that's just enough. It's gonna end. At this point, when those things happen, one time I thought or seemed interested about one of the cells or the visions. And, when I'm having this experience, my body's not there. It is literally as if I'm just witnessing this whole thing happen. I'm just witnessing it. That's it. I kind of like almost like turn to the side and like face. It's almost as if I could turn my vision so I could look into it from in front of it now. And like I joke around about it, but it's like really like it's exactly like kind of went through. I started to think. I was like, oh, that kind of looks like a nuclear fallout. Or I was like, or is that like Arizona? Like you can tell, like depending on like how you're looking at something, you have no idea what's wrong with this picture, but it just didn't feel like welcoming. Or maybe I was just nervous because I was like, I've never like done this before, but like I felt like I just sound cheesy. I also felt like there was the option of like me going into it, and I was just like, I made this thought, like this conscious choice that doesn't like that. It didn't look like it was appealing. And once I thought that, it stopped. The whole experience stopped. And I was like, oh, damn, okay. I started thinking, in my opinion, I think I just started thinking too much of self, and that's what ruined it. Is even when I get to the end, for me, every time I start to like question self or start questioning the experience or trying to figure it out, it's done and over with. I separate myself from it. I think that's what's going on. But if I let the things go, they keep going. Um, this is when I'll even start really starting to get like the physical feelings. And it sounds crazy, but it's like as if I was doing that energy stuff again. Let's say I was going from like my feet up. When I would move the energy like up to my knees, everything below that would be non-existent. Like I wouldn't even feel it. And that would be sitting in a chair meditating or laying down in my bed. It's as if like I think I joked around about it today on another show. I think it's actually kind of a good example, and I have questioned it, but I think it's might be in reverse order. I don't remember exactly how they did it, but Tron, when that dude's getting sucked up into that computer, I mean, if you just look at occult symbolism and understand certain things, I'm like, they're explaining exactly what the fuck I just experienced. To where it's like almost you're just being erased and sucked up out somewhere else, and it just starts going up your body, and you feel all the energy start to rise into what's left. Eventually, that kind of like rises up into my head, and now this whole time, I'm even like still pushing on that pineal gland. That's another thing. The whole time I'm doing this, I'm holding my pineal gland still focused on how I was to begin with to even get it to come forth. So I'm still holding that shit. I will end up like kind of like it feels like that this ends up going towards there. But before I even get that far, like as it starts to like really build up, all of a sudden it feels like I've explained it to where if I was laying on a beach and the waves crashed and ran up the sand, and somehow if the soles of my feet were cut out and the water was able to flow through my body, or like it just feels like a fluttering or of water or energy or an electrical charge or something that just like it literally feels like a fucking flowing. Like it sounds crazy, but like it literally feels like water flowing within me, going up my body. It's a feeling I've never felt until this. It's another thing. Like these feelings that I'm having, I've never felt anything like this until these experiences. That's the only time I'll ever feel them again, which is another reason why it's a little addictive, or I think it can be, because if you enjoy this experience, this is the only way it's going to happen. You can't recreate it in anything else I've seen, or in this world. I start feeling that, and it literally starts to feel like it builds up in pressure, and I'll be holding that like pineal gland, and it's like at this point, like it really starts to push to where like now after the movie things stop, and it's just the eclipse, and the black sphere that's in front of the white burning thing that I was looking at before starts to rise up instead of left to right, like how we would look at a moon waxing and waning or an eclipse normally. It starts to lift up, and like this is an interesting thing. Like when it first starts to lift, and I started to notice it, because it goes a little slow too, but for me it does. Right away, I was like, "Yo, that's the headdress to fucking Toth, where it's that crescent. It's not really it. You'll see the crescent white, and then the black sphere on top of it." And I was like, holy shit, that's to me. I mean, that's exactly what it looked like. And then it just starts to rise up even more. And as soon as it like pulls away from the whole white sphere, and you pull away from it like far enough, like to me, I feel like something snaps or clicks. And then that white light, it's like almost like looking down the barrel of a gun. That's even another reason why I'll say sometimes like pull the trigger. Because to me, it's like at that point, I'm going to shoot myself in the head. That white light shoots all the way down, and it feels like it blasts you, blasts me in the head. There's a part in Apocalypse Now where I believe when the guy's talking at the end about getting shot in the head with the diamond, he's talking about the experience I was having. And like all of a sudden, a white light will flash, and it feels like the back of my head where there is a bee of yarmulke. Sounds crazy. it literally starts to feel like I can feel myself melting out of myself, or peeling out of myself. And it's like I become weightless and I just start feeling this immense like vibration. And the only thing I can even like say that it comes close to, I mean, I would say magnify love by 1,000. And unfortunately, I still don't think you'll get the feeling. But it's the only thing I can kind of equate it to is the feeling of love, but just a huge, immense feeling that fills you. And you almost like start to feel like I'm getting spread out across like, it's really weird. Like almost, believe it or not, like 2001, where you start feeling like looking like at that part where it looks like the guy's being like you're getting that whole spread out look of like different planes or some shit. It like literally feels like you're getting spread out like across like flat. Like it's hard to explain. And then all of a sudden it just feels like you kind of just like mix into like the fabric of what you're witnessing, or part, like you're actually part of what you're seeing. And it's just like that's just looking at what I'm seeing, and the feeling of love is the only thing that's going on this whole time, no matter how short or long it is. And like there's no thought of like my iPhone or the podcast or anything of this world or this reality. There's no hate, there's no guilt, there's no fear. Like this whole experience is just this immense explosion of like love and vibration, just being a part of like everything. And it's really like wild. And unfortunately, like I said, every time I start to like, I guess because like sometimes there'll be things where you'll just be like, wow, that's pretty fucking drastic. Like, fuck. Not that it's in a bad sense. It's just like you start to see shit that, like, to me, it's just like, wow, okay. Like, I've seen that, like, NASA has put images out like that. And you start to be like, I guess, I don't know, part of myself makes a reconnection to the image. And I'm just like, what the fuck is up with this? Where the fuck am I? And then it's like, oh, game over. You thought of self. You have been disconnected from the source and the experience is over. You're like, fuck. But, even, I mean, it's an amazing experience. It's blissful. The most beautiful experience I've ever had in my life. Really. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's fortunate or unfortunate. But there's nothing, like I said, no love, no drugs, no sex, nothing that I could even ever say could ever come close to what it actually feels like to have a magical experience. If I'm taking hallucinogenics myself in the past, I can tell you two completely fucking different things. I'm sorry. I was duped when I thought I was fucking whatever, eating mushrooms when I was younger. Two completely different things. And unfortunately, what I think sucks with this experience to an extent is that, like, depending, I guess, where you are mentally, due to these experiences and maybe even the visions, maybe even some of the feelings, you might start to question, like, how is that even possible with the way that I've been grown up to believe in a reality, in existence? And that can, like, kind of, when people think about, like, oh, I really got, like, red pilled or black pilled. I mean, yeah, some of that stuff, I guess, like, if depending on how you work, could be very hard for your psyche to agree to. But again, I'm not trying to boast, but if you have a magical experience, that's going to be something real fucking hard to swallow. If you start to realize what might really be going on, and that could actually, like, really shatter someone's head if they're not, okay. I mean, in my opinion, just to throw this in there, psychic attacks, the magicians want to start playing games with that. I think all you're doing is pushing a motherfucker out there, and if they can't handle it at that moment, you're just gonna fuck their head up royally. I think that shit is really, you're actually forcing the abyss onto them in a sense. It's a little drastic, but you can really work wonders on weak motherfuckers. So, like, what I'm saying is, like, even with me, there were certain beliefs that I had to accept as knowings. Now it wasn't a belief. That's another thing for me. Belief is not the same as a knowing. A belief is a faith. Like, I believe pink salmon tastes good when it's broiled in the oven. It's not until I eat it do I know I like pink salmon broiled in the oven. It's just a faith. Knowing can really like, wow, okay, and this is why. And like you'll understand. Another thing is like you'll start, for me and other people that I know that have had this experience, will kind of like start making sense of things that you didn't understand beforehand. It's
Mhm.
almost like it's either becomes so blatantly loud in your head. It's like it's not a voice, but it's like just so fucking obvious. It's like someone screaming it at you. Or like for me, it's like I almost will get visions of like a zoetrope, or like someone throwing down cards and like showing me the correlation and how it all makes sense, and like rewiring the way I think to see. I'm like, fuck, how did I not see that the first time? And not as cheesy, and not trying to sound cheesy, and it's not as drastic, but like very much like, after the first few times, I was like, this reminds me of like Neo in the Matrix when he's like, wakes up and he's like, oh, I know Kung Fu. No, I'm not going to wake up and know Kung Fu from a magical experience. At least I don't think so. But, I'll wake up not knowing and understanding things in occultism. And even like, I didn't think of looking into the eyeballs until I had a magical experience, really. For some reason, that was like being told to me or made sense from what happened to me. Somehow I was like, I have to fucking look into the eyes. There has to be something there with what just happened. And that's when I started realizing, well, the ridiculous amount of shit in our eyes and our brain that is blatant in occult symbolism. Um, so like you'll start to understand stuff that 93% of the community will never have the chance of knowing, because either they won't have the balls or they don't know it even exists. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're very small, and I'm not boasting, because honestly, any person has the possibility of doing it. It's just it takes work, and like
Mm.
honest work, I think. And you have to like really understand, like, for me, that magic was like, have an experience with God, not manipulate the world around me.
Mhm, 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 mhm.
But yeah, like, but what I'm saying is like, unfortunately, like a lot of people won't understand it, because it's not something that a lot of people will experience.
Well, I want to say three things, so I'll be concise with it though, Nick.
Mhm.
Is that first of all, when you said the light or the lightning or the light shooting through, it makes me think a lot of Gavura, because that's one of the Sephira we've been studying in one of my Kabbalah classes, and how I often like to use the metaphor of the flintlock or the musket to describe it, because it is like very hammer like if you understand how it works and how it's in sort of a dialectical synthesis with Chesed at all times. It's not really as distinct, maybe, as people would have you believe. There's actually a lot more relationship there. And so
Well, see,
Gavura
that's
also.
what I think is great
Sorry,
about
go ahead.
Gamora. I just want to add, like, what I think is great about you picking up that with, I guess, the white light, is because, in a sense, I do think that like that sphere is very much kind of like, even before Saturn, it's very much of like in between, kind of like already blasting off or heading your way to a magical experience, like to the point to where it's like, all right, I'll use that in the form of blood. That's kind of like, the beginnings of like, of us coming into creation. I mean, obviously, after other major things have already been created, but or the simple fact of that, the red light that we get in the morning, if we're out there to go visualize that, that will actually start to prime our pineal gland to be optimal if we do the right thing for the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, even that red color in multiple ways is even helpful towards, in my opinion, getting out of this shithole, or it's part of coming into form. So I could see how, for me, I could see how you pick a Bora, because that is very much like very much in between both.
Well,
Going,
something you just said that was really interesting, Nick, was that in the tantra, like the Mahavijja tree, we'll call it a tree, that goddess who is there, she holds a hammer, so just like a flintlock, like it's like the striking motion of the combustion, and her number is 8. So I think, although this is obviously different than the Kabbalistic tree, I think it's interesting because she sort of, we've already crossed the abyss by the point we come back down, and then she shoots us into um yeah, she shoots us into the sun in the tantric idea, which shoots us into Netzach. So we go from Tifereth to Netzach. That's how a tantric the version would be. And so I think that's interesting that you said like we come, it's like what we go up, we have to interact with that sphere, and when we come down, we have to interact with that sphere because it's like an axial, like you brought up the swastika. Is there something very axial about it? It's like the force that can move either way, right or left, and it can spin. That's a very Buddhist idea. And so the next thing I wanted to say was that when you were talking about the glowing words, like I could see it in my mind, like we call it the firebrand. So we imagine the words, the Sanskrit words, rotating around us. I'm not going to say the specific thing, but it's a red light. It's a red light with a white core. So it's like a star that has a firebrand around it. And you rotate the mantra in the specific way that the text says to rotate it, and then you expand it out, like exploding, like you were saying, like exploding like a star. But then you can also densify it when you want to be in contact with the deity, which is also part of your mind. It's not a totally, it's not like the Greek idea. It's like, it's not really external to you. It's somewhere in you as a pristine idea or a pristine sort of conceptualization, but it's not you. It's not something external to you, but then there's something that's also relative to you, like you were saying, like it can come closer or further away. And we would say that that's like a kind of frontal generation, like when you're seeing it and there's a magnetization, a dialectical relationship between the object and you, but then you're also kind of the object that you're looking at. So it's like there's a perceptual relationship that you're having. So I think that's really profound. And then the last thing was the salmon. Like to even, it's so weird that you said that, because I was thinking in my mind like pink, 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 because that 20-second path is from Gavura. Well, it can be said to be from Chesed to Gavura or Gavura to Tiferet, depending on how you understand the paths to work. But I think it's interesting because that path is salmon pink.
Yes.
And I just was like,
pink salmon because of Cabalistically the shade. That path might be true, but I'm almost positive one of the four colors for Tifereth is pink salmon.
yes, from the Dion Fortune book. Yeah, no, you're totally
That's
right.
why I use that. Exactly.
And the salmon color is the color of, is said to be like the actual the light from Kether. That is what the salmon is.
That's why I use it.
True light.
And because fish, it can change. Those fish will also go upstream.
That's right.
So like they can go against the current. So I mean there's a whole, you actually busted. There's a whole reason why I used.
I'm sorry.
No, I think that's great that you even like pick that up, because that's exactly with so many things with pink salmon and occultism that's why I use it as an example.
Well, this is the last thing I'll say, and I'll let you keep going. But I think the pink is really important for that 20-second path, because it also is rectified at Yesod. So there's like a secret path, like a Lurianic path between Gevura and Yesod. And so that fire becomes what is popular in like American Masonry is called heatless fire. But that's really like an old idea from alchemy and Buddhism. Like, it's not just from that, but this idea of the heatless fire. And it's also like there. So like people who are thinking like more contemporary magic, like it's very Liber 49 in a way, like the heatless fire of like what is there. And then you could say that Yesod and Dath, Yesod is like the threshold, I like to say, or the gateway to Dath. And then so there's also a relationship there with what you were saying with that kind of striking motion. Like if you're familiar with those Newtonian, the perpetual motion balls, that's often how I think of Dath, is like sort of like this metallic ball that comes in and like strikes. And it's like Pluto. It's very Plutonian. Like you were even saying like the headdress of Thoth. Well, that is like the alchemical symbol for Pluto. And Pluto is described as having an orbit that is it's sort of like the opposite of the other planets, where it like goes in and out, just like that Newtonian sort of perpetual motion machine, I guess, is like a little thing that all those guys have it on their desk, and you know, it keeps going, they keep hitting each other. That's kind of what I think, is that it's like this, it's like symbolizing this planet. It's not just a planet, I'm just saying a planet for a conceptual idea, but it kind of comes in and out. So it's like, it's exactly like what you said. It's like, can you let everything go? Can you have the, can you experience all the kinds of death, because there's probably like three kinds of deaths in a full, like when you're going all the way. But then, like, conceptually, how like far do you want to go, where do you want to go, and how, and like, can you pull it back? And yes, it's super easy to pull back. That's also my experience. So it's really interesting, but then, but there's a point where you cross where it's not so easy. So you have to kind of, you have to be conscious of it, of the experience enough to know how far you want to go, but then also be able to
You
say,
know,
let it go.
you know what the problem is, and I think like I'm just gonna keep it real. One, you know, I think it again, it's a beautiful experience. Uh, and like you were saying, you know, depending on how far you want to take it. Again, I'm not, I guess, boasting because I know people who abuse it for sure. Um, from my experience, and I think this is what can kind of like really start fucking you up. You know, if you really think about it, like when I'm having these experiences, I am kind of like blasting off into like formlessness.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be almost insanity for the mind because it's so, we've been so programmed. I mean, I'm just going to keep it real. There's certainly like, you know, the way we're getting with labels now, I think it's honestly being done to even make it harder for us to ever get out of these fucking flesh suits.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah.
Uh, you know, all those, you know, I think if you fuck with it enough within a certain amount of time, or if you stay out there long enough, it's a lot harder when you come back for your mind to actually grasp, like, wait, where am I or what am I again? Like, I know that may sound crazy, but like, you definitely almost can feel like I one time did it 3 times in a week. I was pushing it because I was really enjoying it, and like I wasn't feeling all that great, and it was like very hard to like reacclimate, like kind of almost like mentally. You know, there was one time I've only said it like a few times on other shows. I'll say it on this show. I mean, and this is crazy. This is fucking reality. I did it one time. It was during the Scarlet Horse series. I think I had did it a few times within a few weeks then. Or I was bringing myself extremely close, a lot as well. I was really pushing it in a sense in other ways during that series. And one time at night, it was like 3 o'clock at night. I did it, and it was wild. Thing is that normally it's like something I would actually do during the day. But the problem was, like again, like I've said before, during December, and I have to pay attention. I think it's sometimes close to April or March, which is really interesting in itself. It's much easier for me to have these experiences. So, like, I guess what I'm saying, like for me, during the winter, sometimes depending on where my head's at, I could lay down and close my eyes, and it would almost be like this scenario will start up, and it's like I don't even have to try that much. So, like, that's kind of, I guess, why I ended up doing it, like, you know, later, and it was like almost like 3 o'clock in the morning, pretty much. And again, I was like fucking around with it quite often. I came out of it, and for like a long time, again, unless you have the experience, I don't think you'll know the feeling. But that experience is like nothing I've ever felt before. So like when you are up and about and it starts to feel like it starts to happen without you thinking about it, it can get like a little worrisome. Because again, it's like, wait, I've only felt this with this experience. So why am I feeling it again? And not even thinking about it. And it's like it feels like you're starting to like fucking go out again. Or it was just like really hard for me to even be like, you know, it was almost as crazy as it sounded, it was almost like Inception for me, where I was like, you know, is this like, am I still like actually stuck in the experience or something? It was to the point to where like I actually Googled on my phone. This is fucking crazy. If there was a tattoo parlor open, because I assumed if I could find a place that was open and I got a needle hit against my arm and I felt it, that I would know I am here and I'm not stuck out there. that was a thought that I actually probably would have went through if there was two places open and there was none. You know, I don't know why I thought there would be, but yeah, like that was even a thought that went through my head because I was actually feeling so lost. I wasn't sure what the fuck to do.
It's really interesting that you say this because I've had a very similar experience where I felt like for at least a few weeks I was kind of floating in between. Like I wasn't quite sure what was real and what wasn't. It felt very nebulous, very smoke like, we could say.
Mm.
And so, yeah, it felt very in between form and formlessness, but in sort of an interstitial period for me. That's how it felt for me. And so, I think what has helped me sort of, I don't like the word ground, but maybe stabilize my practices is just the idea that of the 20-second path again is because I think that's such a fundamental sort of idea and maybe important future reference for those who are interested in Sephardic astrology or Tantric astrology. But I think that the idea is lamed mem dalet. So love is the cause of knowledge. And so it's like you said, like you experience something that is beyond the physical form of love. Like it's something beyond, it's not even profound, is not even, it doesn't have the gravitas of like what it actually is. And maybe that experience doesn't even have gravity, so maybe that's why it's so hard to describe. It's like you can't really apply words to it because that's not, it's not what it is. It's not, it's something beyond even our conceptual like language. So I think that, but that sort of idea of that love can also get you there, and then love can also bring you back down, and like recognize like, yeah, we're here to do something, we're here to think about things, we're here to discuss things, we're here to talk about what it really is, like talk about what the truth really is, because I think that that often gets lost. And like, yeah, I'm not saying I'm a truther, I'm not really a truther, it's not really my orientation. It's, but
Sure.
I do care about the truth. Yeah, I do care about the truth, and I want to talk about it, and I strive to be like as honest as I can in like my own way. But I also think like, what else does that mean? Like lamed mem dalet is like, lamed is related to hod, mem is related to chesed, and dalet is related to death. So you have this idea that words, that mercy or loving kindness and knowledge are really like the key to the universe in some ways, you could say that. And
Mhm.
so, right? So, I mean, like, okay, so there you go. Three things that everybody can do in their like practical everyday life to open up, you know, their perception or understanding of the whole world. So, I guess that's what I've been trying to like do on my own shows, is trying to like look at like what ways can bring us there in a safe way and not like in a, like, one time I've heard you describe like throwing you, some people throw, I think we even discussed this, some people throw themselves off the abyss, like they throw themselves off the cliff or through the threshold, or I always see a doorway, but they throw themselves through. And I've done that before too. But actually my best experiences have been when I willingly walked through of my own knowledge and understanding of where that was going to go, rather than launch myself off, because in some ways I was more in control of the experience and how it went.
Yeah. I know exactly with that. Sure. Because I was even gonna say, I guess blasting off. I mean, yeah, there's nothing like that, but like, I can like to truly enjoy just a beautiful image for a while, and I have to like really put much worry behind what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I won't take myself all the way there, but I'll try to, stay in that one thing. I can see what you're saying. Like, there's a lot of benefits out of that too. You know.
Well, I think that's a really interesting place to end, but I also want to say one thing that you always talk about. So I'm crediting you obviously, but you talk about how the sexual element that you sometimes see or read in text is not about that. And so I agree with you. Obviously, it's not about that, but there's a retentive element, especially in tantric images, that is about what you're talking about, is about that restraining the experience of bliss for extended period of time, but it's not really, it's just showing sexual imagery, but it's actually not sexual. It's actually referring to exactly what you're talking about. So I just want to say that is that it reinforces like everything that you've been saying for at least 3 years.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes. That, and again, even if you look into the eyeball, and if you look at what your optic nerve looks like and how your hyaloid canal moves, you can see a penis and sperm real easy.
Okay, Nick, plug yourself.
Unplug. Pull my plug out. Actually, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. The Occult Rejects. BitChute, Rumble, YouTube, and all major podcasts. If you check it out, you haven't heard it before, you'll find people like like Jin over here, Jin the Ninja. He's one of the rejects, and we got a whole bunch of other people on there: Headless, Jin, JJ Vance, TJ. God, I'm forgetting people now. Teresa, Robbie Marks. A huge slew of people. Come check it out. Awesome co-hosts and guests that I have. And again, thank you, Jen, for being part of it. And it's all on all major podcasts. And we do have the Occult Research Institute.org. That's got a bunch of stuff from other contributors, even people that we've worked with a lot. Megan from 7 Degrees of Wisdom has a bunch of stuff on there. I put a bunch of Mario stuff up there because I do think his tarot knowledge is worth value and worth looking at. I definitely think he looks at it in a different way than most people do. A whole bunch of other contributors that are on there that may not necessarily be part of the rejects, but have been nice enough to contribute or work with us as well. And tons of stuff by the rejects as well as on there. It's a lot of information too. You can learn. There's books, grimoires, and stuff that you can just learn about. And then there's old occultists on there, people that we think were of value of the stuff that the visions that they've seen and the experiences they had, and maybe even the things that they have created and left behind. These people might be of value of knowing who they are. The stuff like that is on there. There's plenty of stuff to go read. So go check out that site. And I'm done plugging. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Nick, for coming on my, we'll call it indie show. And I really appreciate it. And obviously,
thank you.
And I will say, like, there really wouldn't be any Threshold Saints without Occult Rejects. It's definitely, I was even explaining to someone, like, the trajectory of my show, and it would never have happened if my whole thing was to do the Tantra series with you. That was like, I dreamed of doing that. And then it materialized, and then I was like, what can I do now to keep the dialogue going, I guess? Not just with you, but just in maybe a broader way. And so, 100%. You're the OG, and I can't say how much even I appreciate that you invite me on and that you include me with so much. And
one of my boys.
Everybody knows I'm in your camp. So that's it. And so I guess thank you so much, Nick. And then when you come back, I do want, it's been a while since you've done a episode about your own history in the OTO. I know you've done a lot of those interviews in the past, but I want to do an episode on that one day.
Sure, not a problem. For sure.
Please come back and
thank you.
Okay. So thank you guys so much for whoever is listening live, and I really appreciate it. And thank you to Nick and Teresa and all the people in the chat. It was really awesome. Thank you.
Later.
Thanks. Appreciate it.